So, good evening, everybody. And this is our 11th, I believe, lecture on the series of Facets of the Health Humanities for PIETRISCO PROSE. And we have the pleasure and honor to have Fiona Gilmour as our guest lecturer tonight. Fiona is an adult nurse and a PhD candidate at Queen Margaret University, and she has practice and research experience working with older people in living and care homes. And she has an interest in person-centredness, and it will become very clear during her presentation, her lecture, that person-centeredness is close and they feed, from each other, is close to health humanities. So Fiona's PhD research aims to develop older persons' relationships within a care home, okay? And the title of her presentation is Person-Centredness and the Health Humanities. And so I'm going to leave the floor to Fiona. And so take it away when you're ready.
Rossella, I wonder if I'm able to can you see this without the control?
Yes.
You can maybe I don't need the control now.
Okay, so, all right, okay, so shall I introduce you again and we start again?
No, we just go.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. So I'm going to mute myself and I will leave you the floor then, Fiona. Okay.
Thank you, Rossella. Thank you for introducing me. So yeah, as Rossella said, my name is Fiona Gilmour. I'm a nurse and I'm a PhD candidate at Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh. And I'm a PhD candidate within the Centre for Person-Centred Practice Research. So thank you all for coming this evening, and thank you to Rossella for inviting me, and hello to people who are maybe catching up on YouTube. Sorry to have missed you tonight, but it's great that Rosella's we've got that function that we can watch it back on YouTube. So thank you, Rossella, for organising that. So I'll just go on a little bit about the session aims for today. So as I said, today I'll be talking about person-centredness and the health humanities. So within this presentation, I'll share a little bit about my doctoral research. I'll just share that sort of the vision for my doctoral research. I've not started it yet, but I'm hoping to start it soon. And yeah, really by sharing the plans for the research, I'm hoping that we can sort of explore the health humanities within this research, how I've used it within this research, and how that's really, I'm hoping that will enable person-centredness within the research. So I'll begin just by sort of defining person-centredness, sharing with you a little bit about how I understand person-centredness and what it means for this research. Some of you might be familiar with person-centredness, but this is the definition on the screen here that I find most helpful, and the definition is by McCormack and McCants. Yeah, so person-centredness is really an established approach to practice that aims to humanise healthcare. Person-centred practitioners are concerned with understanding and respecting the uniqueness of each person, sort of each person's personhood, and they do that by practicing in a supportive and an enabling way. So the person's at the centre of decisions, at the centre of the care, and person-centredness is really sort of in contrast to more traditional sort of task-orientated approaches to care, that sort of medical model that typically can sort of dehumanise people that are in the healthcare system. And really the overall aim of person-centredness is to really for people to flourish. It's about human flourishing, and it's a relational approach to practice. It's really about relationships. And it differs from concepts such as that you might be familiar with, patient-centredness, maybe service user-centredness. It sort of differs from them in that it values all stakeholders. So as you'll see in this definition, it's about staff, their the service users' significant others, relatives, friends of the person. So really all stakeholders are valued within person-centredness. And I think it's really about, I mean, research tells us that practitioners can't practice in a sort of patient-centred or person-centred way if they themselves don't feel supported, valued, important. So really, if we actually ever want to achieve patient-centredness or person-centredness, it has to be a cultural thing. And that's why we think about it as person-centredness. It's more than just patient outcomes, it's a whole culture. The culture has to be that everyone sort of has to experience that to be able to provide care that's person-centredness. That's sort of what it's based on. So yeah, and I sort of hope to practice in a person-centred way. That's the approach to practice that I take. So, and as a person-centred practitioner, it was important for me that the research also was person-centred. So I'll just talk a little bit about what person-centred research is about. So person-centred research, again, it sort of aims to do research in a sort of less traditional way, in a more humanistic way. It's really about researching with people, not on them. So often person-centred researchers will use sort of participatory methodologies, methods that really enable the participants to influence the research process. So they're involved in decisions about the research. They might influence the aims of the research, whatever it is, and they're part of the design of that in some way. So person-centred researchers really seek to be empowering, emancipating. And person-centred research is not really just about acquiring knowledge of person-centredness, it's also about approaching the research in a person-centred way. So, and they often hope to have sort of real-time change for the participants. So they might be using action-orientated methodologies that are sort of change-orientated. It's about having real-time impact for the people that are involved in the research. Rather than the research necessarily being sort of transferable or something. It's about having real-time impact. So person-centred research are quite interested in developing methodologies that are person-centred because as I said, it's sort of about the process as well as the outcomes. And as part of their ontology, person-centred researchers are sort of encouraged to have a philosophical understanding of person, so what it means to be a person, and that's really to enable them to design research that's around people, that understands people, respects people, so that they're able to engage with the participants in a sort of authentic and meaningful way. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that philosophical exploration looks like when I come on to speak about my research. And as Rossella said at the beginning, the health humanities have similarities to person-centredness, and as I'm sure you're already aware or beginning to realise as I'm speaking, they are very similar. The health humanities have very similar commitments to sort of health, well-being, and actually humanising healthcare. And I suppose one of the things that person-centred researchers are seeking is really creative ways to engage people. So it might be people with, living with a dementia or some sort of cognitive impairment. It might be, sort of hard to reach groups, whatever it is, they're seeking those creative ways to engage people. And I think that's what the health humanities offers person-centred researchers. They offer them those sort of methods and ways of engaging with people that are more creative and might be more engaging. So, artistic, creative methods. And I think the reason that I sort of resonate with health humanities is that I just feel that it sort of gives us the sort of permission, the approval, the means to move away from the task-oriented approaches to care that are based on the medical model and sort of really enable us to engage with people as people, engaging in sort of, maybe fun ways that are, it could be art, music, arts, literacy, film, whatever it is, but it is sort of engaging with what it means to be a person. And of course, person-centred practitioners and person-centred researchers, we're really seeking to understand what it is, what people are about, what's important to people. When we're engaging with participants, we're seeking to understand what's important to that individual person. And I think, from what I understand, the health humanities are really interested in the human condition. And I think that's what we can learn from the health humanities. A lot of it deals with the human condition, what it means to be a person. So we can learn so much about people, persons, humans, the human condition from the humanities. And the health humanities certainly pays attention to the process as well as outcomes. So they tend to have sort of axiological intentions. So the process of engaging is sort of got to be moral and valuable. So it's not all just about sort of epistemological intentions that are really focused on knowledge more than the experience of being part of the research. I was first introduced to the health humanities by Rossella. We worked on a shared reading project together in a hospice in Edinburgh that Rossella was working on. You might be familiar with that. I was working as a research assistant on that project, and also at the time I was working at a care home in Glasgow. And at that time we had a lot of people move into the home in a short space of time. And influenced by the project I was doing with Rossella, I initiated a sort of reading group in the home. So we started, we would discuss poetry, prose, things like that. We would discuss literature. And I was so amazed at that time about, we had these people who didn't really know each other, just moved in, and how we were able to connect as a member of staff. I was able to learn about them through that. There were things that I learned that I possibly wouldn't have without creating that space. But also they learned about each other and connected. And interestingly, sort of often when they came into the room, they maybe didn't know each other, and then they would leave and go and eat lunch together and things. And it was just, that was sort of my introduction to the health humanities, and I really connected with it. And I thought at that point I knew I wanted to do my research, and I was really interested in using sort of the health humanities within that in some capacity. And and really the aim of the research was about that, was the idea of people being lonely in a nursing home, moving into a new home, not knowing the people, that other people live there, not knowing the people that work there, and really the challenges that they have with developing relationships within the home. So that's a little bit of contextual information about sort of person-centredness and the health humanities, and where I sort of, my thoughts around those things. So I'll dive a little bit now into my research and just tell you, give you a quick, so this is sort of the background. I did a sort of scoping review that was around, it sought to understand how older people experience, what's already known about the relationships that older people have in nursing homes. Now, it was specifically nursing homes. So the umbrella term is sort of care homes, and I've got a terrible habit of still saying care homes because that's what I'm used to saying. But I did look specifically at nursing homes, and that's important because other care homes, so for example, assisted living, residential, typically it's not nursing care. Those people don't have nursing care, so typically they're more independent. And when I first looked at the literature, I didn't exclude that literature, I looked at it all, and I did just see that those people tended to find, people in care homes found it easier to develop relationships, but specifically nursing homes where people do have sort of more dependency needs, the evidence is that they find relationships more challenging. And the research that I'm doing, I'm a nurse, I'm doing it in a nursing home, and I'm hoping to include nurses. So I sort of excluded that research. So it is nursing homes specifically. And so basically the evidence is that older people commonly experience loneliness and social isolation when they're living in a nursing home. External relationships are important. the relationships with family and friends out with the home are important. They can sort of support the transition into the home, but forming new relationships in the home is important for some people, and it's important for feelings of sort of well-being and belonging when they're living in the home. So I suppose it's not everyone's going to want to have relationships and form new relationships when they live in the home, but evidence sort of suggests that they might, and they should be offered the opportunity to do that, and they aren't always. And nursing home staff are really in a sort of unique position to support the psychosocial needs of older people in nursing homes. So, yeah, so it's certainly possible for these people to develop relationships within their home, but they can experience challenges with doing that independently. As I said, the staff are sort of in a unique position to support that, and yeah, it's, I suppose, so they're sort of experiencing a disconnect between what they say they want. Often people want close relationships with their peers and staff or staff in nursing homes, but there's this disconnect, and I think often they're not encouraged, they're not invited to discuss their expectations or their needs in relationships with the staff, and they don't really feel able to influence or change them. And I think what's clear to me from the evidence base is that there's a limited use of sort of participatory, action-orientated research. So, researchers are going in kind of time and time again, the same things are coming up, that not the older people aren't necessarily satisfied with their relationships in care homes, but not a lot is done about it. So yeah, so as I said, so it was really about this idea of supporting older people to overcome loneliness and develop relationships in their own home. And as we know, the health humanities, there's certainly evidence that the health humanities can support relationships. They can support person-centred communication, engaging in those kind of activities can. And the other thing that's interesting is that the health humanities can support staff to reflect on their practice, and that's something that's not really seen in the literature. It doesn't mean that it's not happening, but older people are saying that they're not happy with their relationships, but there isn't much evidence of staff reflecting on that and thinking about the way that they relate with older people, and that's something that I want to do in the research. So as I said earlier, person-centred researchers are a part of their sort of philosophical exploration. They're encouraged to consider the nature of persons. So I kind of started that exploration. I started engaging with sort of philosophical, theoretical literature, and I reflected on my own beliefs. So I concluded firstly that I have a relational understanding of persons. I consider nursing to be relational, and I view myself as interpersonal. And then I began engaging with sort of philosophies, and I found John McMurray's community philosophy. And John McMurray, this philosophy sort of validates my own beliefs about persons, personhood, and person-centredness. And you may remember from Rossella's lecture on film in the health humanities that she spoke about Cicely Saunders, who sort of developed the vision for the hospice. And interestingly, John McMurray's philosophy, Cicely Saunders was influenced by John McMurray's philosophy. So it might be of interest to you, Rosella. But yeah, so fundamentally, John McMurray said that persons are agents and they exist in relation. And he sort of spoke about friendship, so this idea that people can realise their own personhood, what matters to them, their own sense of self in relationships that he called friendships, close relationships, and a whole community, a whole culture, or where all people in a group are relating as friends, as a community. And that's sort of my vision for a care home, is for it to be a community. People in the home, certainly the staff, are intending friendship with the people who live in it. That's a bit about it. And he sort of captured his philosophy by saying all meaningful knowledge is for the sake of action, and all meaningful action is for the sake of friendship. And that really is what I understand about person-centredness. It's sort of about learning together and acting together. And I think this is the thing that from the literature that's coming up, is that, people are going in, they're researching, they're learning about people's experience, but that learning's not being used for action necessarily. There's not much evidence of the research out there having a whole lot of impact. And I think that's what Murray would say, is that's probably it's immoral, because knowledge really ought to be for the sake of action. And that's what I hope to have in my research, is for the learning that I have in my research to have impact in the setting. So now, when I was looking at McMurray's philosophy, I really read about persons. And one of the things that McMurray said is that people have the capacity to be critical, and creativity is really important for that. So people are able to sort of critique through reflection. They use reflection to be critical, and he believed that that creativity in the arts can really support that process. And he really thought that creativity in the arts were important for emotional connection, emotional reflection, sorry. So he thought, having emotions is a fundamental part of being a person, and that engaging in creativity in the arts really enables us to engage with our emotions and learn about ourselves, our motivations and things like that. So, of course, the arts and creativity can be done in isolation, or it can be done as part of a group. And he was really fascinated by the ability of persons to connect with and interpret art. So he sort of advocated for artistic expression as a method of communication. So he sort of steered away from the dialogical understanding of communication that sort of privileges language, and sort of gives permission for us to use creativity as a method of communication to express. And that was really important to me when I read about that. When I started the PhD, I had experience of working with people using creativity, and I sort of knew that it worked, but engaging with his philosophy really supported me to understand why it works, how it works, what is it about people that, that enables us to engage with creativity, but also communicate using it. So yeah, if you're interested, I find his philosophy quite accessible to read and might be of interest to you. But anyway, so yeah, so sort of it was the scope and review findings in McMurray's philosophy that influenced and informed the research aims and the research questions. So I'll quickly go on to the research aims, and then I'll talk a bit about the methodology and methods. So here they are, and I won't sort of go into it, but what I will say is that because I'm intending to use a participatory methodology, so it was sort of challenging for me to think about what the research aims, the research question would be. On the one hand, I was going to ethics, and they sort of want you to have a good idea of what research looks like. But on the other hand, it was really important to me that the people participating in the research were able to influence the research, that it was going to be, it had to be, I couldn't just go into an nursing home and say, this is what I'm doing. I wanted them to sort of shape the research in some sort of way. So basically, the older people in the home essentially will sort of, their experiences, what they share with me, will influence the overall research question, but it vaguely is about, developing older people's relationships in homes. So I'm interested in understanding how older people experience relationships in the home, and what their visions for relationships are in the home. And then I'll be working with co-researchers. So we'll have some participants and we'll have some co-researchers, and they'll really support the research and help us come up with what we're doing. So yeah, so as I said, the key aim is to develop older people's relationships within the home. So I'm going to do that by exploring older people's experiences and visions for relationships in the home, also by supporting staff to become aware of the older people's experiences. So sort of supporting some reflection for staff, and then working sort of participatory with staff and residents, the sort of co-researchers, to analyse the findings and sort of co-create actions. So yeah, so the methodology. So as I've already mentioned, I'm hoping to use a participatory methodology. That's the intention. And so I developed tailored participatory methodological principles for this research. And here they are. And the reason I did this is that person-centered researchers they're encouraged to develop sort of innovative person-centered methodologies, and that's really to enhance and sort of expand the understanding of person-centeredness in research. So now clearly here you'll see that I've got the methodological principles here, and you will see that they're very similar to other participatory methodologies. You know, they're similar to that. But person-centered researchers are encouraged to develop methodologies to make them more person-centered. So sort of from the ontological right through to developing the methodology, people are at the centre of the research. We've considered what people need, who people are, what's fundamental to people, and tried to build that into the research design. So people are sort of at the centre of the whole research, and the overall aim is to respect people and support their personhood. And as you'll see, I've highlighted one of the methodological principles that is probably of most interest to tonight, and that's about creating conditions for critical and creative reflection and communication. And I'll talk here now a little bit about the methods, and this is probably the most interesting bit of the research, where you really see this. Hopefully you'll see the humanities within this. Now, I'm not an expert in the humanities, so this is my sort of go at trying to embrace that for this research and to make it more person-centered. So first I intend to have sort of interview conversations with older people, and that's really about exploring how they currently experience relationships in the home and what their visions, hopes are for the relationships within the home. So it's trying to get a sense of where we're at and where they would like to go with their relationships. So is it the relationships with staff that they want to develop, or is it the relationships with peers? It's up to them. So really, I'm hoping that they will decide how the interview conversation goes. You know, they'll decide where it is. So we could do it in the garden, their bedroom, there's an art room in the home. So it's up to them where we do it. I'm going to offer evoke cards. So evoke cards are sort of, it's a mixture of pictures and words. So we'll use them if the older person chooses to sort of, you know, support communication throughout the interview. They might pick words to help them, you know, just think, you know, reflect on what's happening in the home and create their vision for what it would be like. I'll invite them to, you know, they can create poems, create some sort of image. There'll be creative material on offer. It's really about trying to get them to create their vision for what relationships could look like and what relationships are currently like, and to support them to be able to communicate that with me. So they can, you know, create poetry, whatever it is that they want to do that. And that will sort of accompany the interview conversations that we're having. And then after that, I'm going to invite staff to critical conscious raising workshops. And that's really about enhancing their awareness of the older people's relationships in the home. So we're going to use creativity in those workshops to support self-reflection for the staff. So the workshops will begin, you know, sort of be again inviting staff to reflect on what relationships are like in the home currently. So using creative methods to do that. I'm going to get them to sort of think about that, reflect on what that's like currently, and then create their visions for relationships in the home. So where they think that things could go, and start to sort of imagine what they can look like. And again, I will be encouraging them to use sort of creative and artistic expression and that's about that emotional reflection. And hopefully just thinking in creative ways as well, unlocking something maybe to get them to think in new ways. So that's sort of the first part of the research. And then the second bit is with the co-researchers. So the co-researchers can be staff or older people. And we've already got some people as co-researchers in mind. So they'll be invited to 2 workshops. And the first one will be a participatory analysis workshop. And that's really about starting to analyse the data, trying to, come up with the themes and identify some of the issues that are potentially occurring within the home. And to do that, we'll use Boomer and McCormack's 2010 7-step participatory analysis method. And that's, I'll just talk you through the steps quite quickly. But the first step in that is presenting the data. So, the creative material, the interview transcripts, all the material from the workshops and the interview conversations and the accompanying data I'll present that, and we'll start to go through that, and I'll invite the co-researchers to look over the data. And then I'll invite the co-researchers to engage, including myself, I'll do this too, to engage with creative materials. And so the aim of that is to capture our initial impressions of the data. So what are we seeing? Let's create that. And then the fourth step is inviting the co-researchers. We'll all split into pairs and we'll start discussing the data, and we'll start discussing our creations. What is it we're seeing from the data? What is it we're thinking? And then I'll invite the co-researchers individually to think through the data again, and consider themes. And again, we can use creativity to do that. Sixth step is inviting the co-researchers to share their themes with the group. So they'll have thought about that individually in step 5. Step 6, we're sharing it with their groups and trying to find common themes. What are the themes that are emerging from this? And we might use creativity again in that step. And the 7th step is inviting the group to sort of populate the themes with the data. So we've got the themes created and make sure that the data is sort of there. Now, I'm sort of being vague about what the creative methods are, because really I will provide material and sort of encourage people. I can certainly give examples of things, but I suppose I want it, because it's participatory, I don't want to sort of instruct people how to do it. It's up to people, but certainly I will have some ideas of things that we can do. And then the final step, the final workshop with the co-researchers, is the action planning workshop. So, and this is where we'll co-create action. So in the previous workshop, we'll have identified the common themes, we'll come up with the issues, and now we actually are coming up with actions. What is it that we're going to do? So, and this is sort of where I kind of finish. I'll support, this is sort of the last, although I work in the home, this is my last sort of step as the researcher. We'll come up with an action plan, and they can revisit it, or we can revisit it at the home, but I won't be doing that as my sort of necessarily my PhD time. That'll be work time. But yes, so I suppose we're coming up with the actions now. I'm hoping that we can use the humanities to make changes. So although we've used the humanities within the research and we've used creativity to sort of learn, I'm hoping that actually this will come up with some, we can help, the humanities can help with some of the solutions. So once we've identified what the issues are in the home, hopefully the humanities can be solutions as well. So we'll come up with the action plan, we'll work together to think about what the actions are, and we'll hopefully disseminate that within the home. And yeah, so that's the sort of methods for the research, and hopefully you'll be able to see the methodological principles within that of all the things that I'm trying to create. So that's sort of the conclusion for tonight. Now, as I said, I don't claim to be an expert in health humanities. I'm definitely a novice, but I do value the humanities. For in nursing practice and nursing research, I really do think that it can support person-centred practice. As I said, I view people as sort of relational, emotional, and I really think that sort of creative reflection is really important for people to connect with their own emotions, to learn about themselves, to learn about other people. I really do think that creativity is important for that. So yeah, and as I said, within the research, I'm aiming to use creativity, as part of the process to support communication, to support learning, to help us make sense of the data, to think about it in creative ways. But also I'm hoping that the humanities will offer some solutions. So I imagine that they will feature in our action plan. So yeah, so thank you all for being here tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions and happy to have a bit of discussion about sort of the humanities and using the humanities in research, and humanities is sort of enabling better outcomes for people in healthcare. Okay, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Fiona. If you could unshare your presentation, and so we go into a more gallery form, and we can maybe have a conversation about your very, very interesting presentation. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to spotlight you if I can. So we're all remove spotlights, and so we're all together. And let's see if we can go into a gallery. Here we go. Okay, so I really enjoyed your presentation, and I'll tell you why, because rightly enough, you say that, you know, there is mutual feeding between person-centeredness and the philosophy of the person, what it is to be a person, and the health humanities, which we've been dealing with in you know, most of the series. And in a way, you've gone a step back from us, giving us a really solid base on why we use health humanities, you know. So you've given us some foundation study here, because as you conclude, you know, the next step for you is making an action plan to see how humanities can then help to create action and to create better relationships. So you've given us the foundation, the philosophical nearly foundation that we need. And I think this is really important. You know, if we were all to go into a volume, I would probably put your study first, because it gives us the, you know, the basis, and then we actually then show with the humanities what we can do, you know. And so I feel that was really, really interesting. And my question is, have you got, because Fiona, you know, when we were working together, we shared a study in with the Read to Lead group in Liverpool. And so Fiona has had some exposure, although she's been a nurse, and she it doesn't come from experience and the degree in humanities. You know, she's had exposure to how to use poetry and short story or novel even, and you know, like literary texts in order to create relationships or better relationships within a group. And that was somehow originally part of the plan, but then you decided to go back more into the philosophy of centeredness, which is very innovative. And I just wonder if you were still thinking of you know, making a plan taking into consideration that what you learned in that course, or if you have other ideas of what's, maybe it's a bit premature now, I don't know, but you know, if you have some ideas of how you could use some art form, photographs, you know, you've talked about evoke cards, which is already obviously visual and linguistic. Do you have any ideas of what you probably be using as your action or your plan, basically?
This is something that I have been a little bit reluctant to think too much about, to sort of preempt what the older people are going to see. So I'm almost reluctant to think too much about what's going to come out, and try and just stay open to, I suppose, not to influence the research too much. So it's not something that I've given a whole lot of thought to. And to be honest, as I said, and as you said, I'm not, you know, my background isn't the humanities. It's something that I'm willing to learn about, but I don't feel really comfortable with totally. I suppose I've sort of put it off a little bit until the actions come up, and maybe it's something you could help with, Rossella, but
Yeah,
certainly what I would say is that there are people within the home who, you know, the activities coordinators, they do have some really good, they've had some really good training and learning around those sorts of things. I'm hoping that they might have some ideas too. They do sort of art groups, and literacy groups and things like that in the home. There's libraries. So there are those sort of things that are available that I suppose I wouldn't necessarily need to be the person that facilitated it. We could do it, sort of have someone else do it or someone external. But yeah, I think I could give you an update on, maybe I could come back and talk about what the action plan looks like and how we've managed to integrate the humanities into that. But yeah, thank you for offering to mentor me with that, Rossella, because it is something that I don't feel, although I did do the read to lead course, and I could certainly offer that as one of the solutions, as one of the actions. I could certainly facilitate the read to lead groups where we sort of discuss text and read aloud and have conversations about what we're reading.
Yeah.
But
it sounds more like you know, you maybe once you've finished your PhD and you've got all your sort of methods explored and written up, and then you've got your plan for actions, that you know, that research can be carried on by someone else maybe. So you've given the innovative sort of philosophical basis, and then someone else can go, right, okay, let's go back and take person-centeredness into consideration, and then use, you know, it could be anything. It could be music, it could be photography, it could be film, it could be literature, it could be poetry, it could be, you know, remember that researcher we met in, was it Exeter? I can't remember where we went.
Yes, Plymouth. Was it
Plymouth,
Plymouth University?
yeah, that's right, yeah. And he was working with cards, remember, with kind of images that kind of I don't know, a kind of like, I don't, cartoon kind of images, weren't they, that would connect, that were all about life in the hospital, or life in the hospice, or life in the in palliative care. I think he was working, and then, you know, they were all representing good relationships and bad relationships, and that would evoke basically a feeling of, you know, this is going well and this is not going so well, you know, so what? And I can't remember exactly how he used them, but I often thought maybe I should ask him for, you know, to give us a lecture too on
That
that.
would be good, because I remember you spoke to them more than I did, so I actually hadn't appreciated that that's what his research was about. So that's interesting, and I would love to hear more about it.
Yeah, and also because maybe useful for you as well, because I think it's more working with in the same field that you're working more than mine, you know, because he resorted to artists, and he was actually working on the relationships between medic and patient, which is what we're all doing really, basically, but probably you even more, because you're a professional nurse, and so you've got first-hand experience of what it is like. And I know as well, sorry if I mentioned that you actually won an award at one point, 1 year, as best nurse. So obviously you've got good relationships with your patients. And so I might ask him, because yes, I went to another a conference afterwards in Gravesend a couple of months later in September, and I learned even more about that. And I thought, so I might get in touch with him, maybe ask him if he wants to give us a lecture on that. But yeah. And yeah, and then I also wondered, so basically, how, apart from the evoke cards, how are you going to do these workshops and interviews? Are you going to be designing questionnaires? You know, what is it you're designing to make people and staff reflect with each other?
So I've got an indicative sort of interview guide for the interviews with older people, but I really am hoping that it's more conversational than sort of questioning and answering. I'm hoping that we will be able to sort of develop a relationship during that interview. So yeah, and I suppose it's based sort of on, the interview guide is based really on the scope and review findings sort of, and it's really about how, firstly asking people how they experience relationships in the home. So what are the relationships currently like with other people who live in the home? What are their relationships like with staff? But mostly it's about, how do we move forward? Is there anything that it's really about offering them an opportunity to give feedback. What would they like to change? What are their visions? What are their ideas for what relationships? And I suppose they might come up with some ideas of solutions, of actions that they would like to see. And of course, we can trial these actions and then review them. It doesn't mean, you know, it will sort of, hopefully this action plan will not be a start finish thing. It will be something that is continuously reviewed. It's hopefully this is a process that we can continue to use in the home. It won't be, you know, a one-time thing. Hopefully that will be the impact. So that's sort of the older people. And then the staff, again, it's sort of, that's the one that's, I'm going to work with the home a little bit more to develop that. And I suppose I'll wait until I see what happens with the interviews with the older people, what's coming up for them. And then, because I suppose part of this is really to get them to think about, to imagine what the relationships are like in the home, but also for me to sort of speak on behalf of the older people. These are the type of things that they're saying. I'll do it anonymously and hopefully in a very non-threatening way for the staff. But I suppose first of all, I really just want to get them thinking on their own before I sort of break that news or sort of give them that feedback, but really to get them thinking on their own independently. What would it be like to live in the home? What would it be like to experience it? You know, and to get them to reflect on their own practice. How do they relate to the people that live in the home? You know, so and that's, and I suppose maybe I will encourage them to do that. And I mean, I imagine there's somebody who writes music, so I imagine that could be, she's got a guitar. I imagine that she might write a song. I know that she does things like that. People might decide to write poetry, create something. I don't know. I suppose sort of encourage them to have a little bit of self-reflection in their own time to think about that.
Are you going to ask them to have a diary, maybe, to keep
They
it?
could, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Whatever they decide to do, it's really open to them. And I will take part in that process as well, so that, because I'm a member of staff and I can, I suppose it's important for me to be part of the group. As well as
the diary would be really useful for them, analysing the themes and, you know, whether if there's any recurring or common, you know, kind of feelings or impressions or, you know, concerns, I suppose. Yeah, could be negative or positive. And also I had another question. Sorry, I'm really interested in this, and because we worked really quite well that time together, and so I know, you know, we conversed a lot about things, especially on our Flybe adventure. Our Flybe was suddenly cancelled in Plymouth, and we had to, you know, we were rescued into a hotel, and it was all like a bit of fun. So we had a lot of time together over that conference, and one thing that comes to me as a really positive reaction to what you're doing is that by, you know, like it doesn't sound as if your research is just a piece of exercise that you're going to conduct for your PhD and for the care home in order to write a PhD, but it sounds as if by taking into consideration and asking the older people and the staff, and yourself being one of them, to participate in the research, you're automatically including them in a process that will probably change the relationships in the care home already, you know. And so that's, you know, by doing that, the older people will feel more part of what is going on in the care home and how they're being cared for. And also the caring staff and their families, maybe, I don't know if you're also involved in families, will feel that what they say will be valued and will be implemented. And so it's actually not just a piece of research, it's actually a complete innovative change in the life of the care home. And I think that's really good. You know, that's what we need more. You know, I was thinking that, you know, in the communities that we're part of, whether it is work or a parish or a home or a house, you know, with your family, you know, that would be really useful to do in all communal life, when people have to be taken into consideration for who they are and valued for who they are and their opinions, rather than just do the work and that's it, or something like that. So I really think that what you're doing is really important, and it can start from a care home, but it can move on to other parts of society and communities. So yeah, so thanks for that, because I think it's very positive. I don't know if anybody else has any other questions. I kind of finished mine for the moment.
If I may, I would just reinforce what Rossella has just said, that you have sort of research almost taking an activist role in change, to the extent that you try to understand the situation better, involve people, and in the process probably come up with suggestions that can be implemented in the future in that care home, and by extension or per extension in others. And that is a very vital connection between academia and the rest of society and the rest of community, as Rossella was saying. Yeah, and possibly by bringing the points of view of the people there into consideration, so of the residents into consideration, as well as of the members of staff and their relationship, it helps identify priorities. So things that maybe have been seen as priorities by the staff, maybe they're not the priorities, maybe there's a reshuffling, or maybe new priorities come to the fore. And so that may help sort of redesign activities and relationships within the care home. So I'd say that kind of close and vital connection is really important. So this is just to reinforce what Rossella has said.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you. But yeah, and I think you're both right about that sort of the academia and the practice gap. That's, what we're learning in academia isn't always translated into change in practice in the way that we hope that it will. It doesn't always have the impact. So yeah, hopefully that will be one outcome of this research.
Yeah, that's why I also believe very much in always implementing what you're studying in a real community. So you're working in end of life care, I was working in palliative care, and research can start from one end or the other, but with the way I am and how things resonate with me, I always prefer to start from the practice, and then have an inductive method rather than deductive, because I don't know, I'm probably a very practical person in the end, more than I thought. And in a way, you already have some results in your hands. You see how people are, and then just say like, right, okay, this is how we this is how it's working with real people and real community. What can we, what can we extract from that, and then go up to the theory, and then meet with people that actually work on the theory, because we need both. So yeah, and I think we're doing very complementary works, John, here research. So thanks very much. And yeah, any other questions? Does anybody else have a question?
Thank you, Chiara. I'm just seeing your comment. Oh, I think Chiara's gone now.
Okay, yeah, she's gone, I think now, yeah. So sorry, what you hear is my cat. she's meowing, I think. That's she's got a question. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, unless there's more. Thanks very much also for the pointer to the philosopher. John, remind me again.
John McMurray. So he was he was a Scottish philosopher.
Okay, I will.
Most of his,
I will get the book. and do a little bit of reading there.
There are two, you can find them online. They're the Gifford lectures. So there's sort of two series that he wrote at the end. One was the Self as an Agent, that was written in 1957, and then Persons in Relation, and that was written in 1961. So those are the two sort of books that he wrote at the end of his sort of philosophy that sort of capture the whole philosophy.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Rossella, he explores religion a lot, quite a bit as well. So certainly in his earlier work, that's sort of how he came to understand persons and came to understand sort of communities, and was through religion. You know, what is it about religion that's so appealing to people, was sort of how he started his philosophical.
Yeah, because I don't know you guys, but you know, I'm a believer. I'm a Christian believer, and you know, we talk. When I was a child, you know, the whole kind of religious or spiritual kind of dimension of Jesus Christ and salvation, etc., was taught in a very different way from the way it is taught now, and what came up for me earlier on when you were talking about John McMurray is that, you know, when Jesus Christ is explained as relational, it completely changes, and you take to him, you know, and also obviously, you know, because we are people and we are in need of relations. And I think that what you're saying now is actually how what I was thinking earlier on. I didn't want to mention it because, you know, it's not everybody's is religious, but it does a lot for me when it talks about that spiritual life should be relational and should be concrete in, you know, improving relations between people, and whether you do it with, you know, literature, you do it with religion or whatever. But that really struck me when what you wrote, you know, the excerpt you wrote from John McMurray. And so yes, and also I remember, I think I mentioned it in one of my talks, that this researcher called David Cool, he actually he wrote a book that is called what was that? What Dying People Want, I think it's called. And is that what dying people want is being loved, loving relations, good relation, loving relations, and the belief in something which is bigger than themselves. So a kind of hope towards, you know, towards something which is, I suppose, spiritually. I mean, and the need for spirituality is a capacity that we all have since we're children, whether it is Buddhist or flower or whatever, or a religion, particular religion. Apparently, the human race has that capacity from. So if we all have that capacity, we all have that need and capacity for relations, and that's really important. And that's why person-centeredness is so philosophically, I think, is really, really important for the studies that we're doing here in health humanities. So I'm really, really thankful and glad that you actually brought it to us, because we hadn't thought about it. Without you, we wouldn't have had it as part of a series. And I think it's brilliant. It was a great addition, Fiona. Thank you very much. So
thank you. It was very helpful, even just preparing for this, and, you know, speaking to sort of a different audience. It's really, yeah, it was the process of preparing for this was helpful for me, and I've really enjoyed it.
And we all help each other. You know, the more we converse between different disciplines, I think the more we have ideas, and the more porous the, you know, the kind of the walls that we tend to have in between disciplines, the more porous they become, and we can actually let seep knowledge between them, because we all need, you know, science and humanities are often split in our modern world. But, you know, once upon a time, people like Leonardo da Vinci, he was a doctor, he was a scientist, he was a poet, he was a painter. You know, they were sort of, educated in all arts and sciences. And then in our modern world, we're all being split into modular, even at university, we study a few modules and got a degree. So I think that this has been a very beautiful series because, and you may not be the last one, because I may get in touch with this Spanish guy whose name I forget now, and maybe ask him to do one more lecture, maybe, and see if he can. But anyway, unless there are other questions, either Celia or Cecilia, if you have any questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. And if no questions come up, it's probably the right time. Cecilia, do you have a question?
No, I'm just so sorry. I'm going to, I really look forward, especially having listened to you, I so look forward to now hearing your lecture, Fiona. It's wonderful that they're being recorded. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to join you until 7. But two things, I just remember they like up until all Newton, they were all natural philosophers, weren't they? Boyle, this there wasn't the concept of science and letters as separate entities is really a 19th century concept. Yeah. So this, and I suppose it's funny. I just hearing what Fiona. Just hearing the end of the conversation, I suppose one of the things, do you think even at an early age in some ways, because you are, it's funny, the fact that you think about end of life as another phase of life, does it not help? I think does it not help us to live better if we think about, not that like you're not racing to the end of it, but what you were saying, Rossella, about relational spirituality. I think even it's kind of something that if we start thinking about it earlier on, it just seems more natural. It loses its kind of fear or power over us. I don't know. This isn't really a question. It's just these are ideas that the conversation brought up in my mind.
Yeah, and you kind of going back to religion and to spirituality, you lose that separation and that aloofness that sometimes either the church or clergymen or even God will have, with these creatures, for example, well, it becomes a relation like a family. And I think that's really important, because then you're no longer afraid, you're no longer scared, you no longer feel excluded. And I think that this is how human life ticks, really. This is how we tick as people. And so even if we want to move away then now from spirituality back into our communities, that's the only way we can actually make progress, is to take away the separation, the aloofness between who is in charge and who is parents, whether it is spiritual or medical or teaching, teaching students. Because then you have full participation. So participatory, I think, is also a very important keyword, and Fiona's using that a lot. And so, so I think you've really enriched our series, Fiona, with a lot of ideas that I was saying earlier, Cecilia, that if there was something coming out of these series, which there is in part, I would actually probably put Fiona's talk first, because she really goes back one step to the foundational philosophy of what we then become health humanities. She's looking at person-centeredness, and we actually then use the humanities in order to foster this relational, don't we? So thank you very much for that again.
Yeah, I'm now really, really, really curious to listen.
Well, feel free to drop me an email or anything like that.
Sure, I'll share, if you want, I can share with you guys here your email, and if they want to get in touch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, so we'll probably close here then.
Yes.
Thank you again, Fiona. Thanks everybody for participating, and good night.